The billionaire stopped breathing when he saw the woman at the front of the classroom. Not because she was beautiful, but because he had mourned her for 15 years. His son squeezed his hand. "Dad," the boy whispered, "that's my new teacher." And in that moment, Christopher Martinez realized the life he built after her death was about to collapse. There are moments in life that split your world in two. Moments where everything you thought you knew shatters like glass, and standing in the wreckage, you realize the past 15 years were built on silence, sacrifice, and a love that never truly died. This is the story of Christopher Martinez, a man who had everything except the one thing that mattered. And it begins on an ordinary Tuesday morning that would change 3 lives forever. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Christopher Martinez wasn't supposed to be dropping his son off at school that morning. In his world of billion-dollar acquisitions and boardroom negotiations, the 33-year-old had people for that. Drivers, nannies, assistants. But his son, 9-year-old Hugh, had asked. Not begged, just asked in that quiet way of his, looking up from his cereal with those dark eyes that were too knowing for a child. Hugh had said he wanted his dad to meet his new teacher, just this once. And something in Christopher's chest, that place that had been hollow since his wife Sandra passed away 3 years ago, shifted just enough for him to say yes. The rain had just stopped when they pulled up to Maplewood Elementary in Christopher's black Mercedes. Hugh grabbed his backpack, a worn thing covered in patches of stars and planets, something Sandra had bought him before she got sick. Christopher had offered to replace it a dozen times, but Hugh refused. Some things his son understood better than most adults, you hold on to. The school hallway smelled like wet coats and cafeteria pizza. Christopher felt out of place in his tailored suit among the mothers in yoga pants and fathers in jeans. Hugh led him down the corridor, past construction paper turkeys and spelling tests covered in gold stars, to room 7. The door was painted bright blue, and taped to it was a welcome sign decorated with hand-drawn flowers. 3rd grade, Miss Mitchell, it read. Christopher's hand was reaching for the door when Hugh looked up at him with a strange expression, something that might have been nervousness or anticipation. Hugh said, "Dad, just remember to breathe, okay?" Before Christopher could ask what that meant, Hugh pushed open the door. And Christopher's world stopped. Standing at the front of the classroom, writing the date on the whiteboard, was a woman he hadn't seen in 15 years. A woman he thought he'd never see again. Christina Mitchell, though she'd gone by Tina back then, back when they were teenagers with their whole lives ahead of them. Back when Christopher was just Chris, a scholarship kid from the wrong side of town, and she was the girl who saw past all of that. She turned when she heard the door. The marker fell from her hand, hitting the floor with a soft click that echoed in the sudden silence. Her face went pale, then flushed, her green eyes wide with something between shock and terror. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 years, neither of them moved. Christopher forgot how to breathe. He forgot where he was. All he could see was the girl from his past, older now, tiny lines around her eyes, her auburn hair shorter than he remembered, but still her. Still the woman he'd loved so completely that when she disappeared without a word in the summer of 2008, he thought he might actually die from it. Then Hugh's voice cut through, bright and entirely too pleased with himself. "Miss Mitchell, this is my dad, Christopher Martinez. Dad, this is my awesome teacher I've been telling you about." The boy was grinning like he'd just won the science fair, which Christopher would realize much later in a way he had. Christina recovered first, Years of teaching giving her the ability to put on a professional mask even when her world was collapsing. She extended her hand, formal, distant. "Mr. Martinez," she said, and her voice was steady even though Christopher could see her fingers trembling. "Hugh has been a wonderful addition to our class." Christopher shook her hand. Her skin was warm, familiar in a way that made his throat tight. Up close, he could see the freckles across her nose that she used to hate, the small scar above her left eyebrow from when she fell off her bike at 16 and he'd held her while she cried. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. What do you say to someone who vanished from your life without explanation? Someone you looked for, called for, drove yourself half crazy trying to find, until eventually you had to accept that she didn't want to be found? In the end, all he managed was, "Thank you for taking such good care of him." His voice came out rougher than he intended.
Hugh was still standing there, watching them with those two intelligent eyes, and Christopher suddenly understood with perfect, devastating clarity that this wasn't a coincidence. His son had orchestrated this. The new school, the specific teacher, all of it. But before Christopher could process that revelation, the bell rang, and children started flooding into the classroom, backpacks bumping, voices rising in that particular chaos of 9-year-olds. Christina stepped back, that professional mask firmly in place. "I should let you go, Mr. Martinez. Hugh, please find your seat." Christopher was being dismissed, and there was nothing he could do about it. He looked at his son, who was already heading to a desk by the window, that satisfied smile still playing at his lips. Then Christopher looked back at Christina one more time. She was already turning away, but not before he saw it. The shimmer of tears she was fighting to control. He walked out of room 7 feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. His hands were shaking as he drove to his office downtown, barely seeing the road. 15 years. 15 years since Christina Mitchell had vanished from his life the week before they were supposed to run away together, supposed to start their lives in a new city where nobody knew them and nobody cared that he was from the projects and she was from the historic district. He'd waited at the bus station for 6 hours. When she never showed, he'd gone to her house. Her father, Carl Blue, had answered the door, his face cold as stone. "She doesn't want to see you," he'd said. "She made her choice, and it wasn't you." Christopher had tried calling, texting, showing up, but Christina never responded. Eventually, her number changed, and when he drove by her house months later, it was empty, a for sale sign in the yard. He'd convinced himself he was over it. He'd gone to college on that scholarship, built his company from nothing, married Sandra, a kind woman who understood that part of his heart would always belong to a girl from his past. Sandra had never asked him to forget Christina. She just loved him anyway, with a generosity that still made his chest ache. And then cancer took Sandra, fast and cruel, and Christopher had built walls around what was left of his heart. He'd thought those walls were solid, but 5 minutes in a third-grade classroom had reduced them to dust. When he got home that evening, Hugh was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich, humming something off-key. Christopher leaned against the doorframe, watching his son, really looking at him. Hugh had Sandra's dark hair and smile, but he had something else too. A calculating intelligence that was all his own. "You knew," Christopher said quietly. Hugh didn't even pretend to be confused. He looked up, met his father's eyes directly. "I found your old journals in the attic last summer," he said simply. "When I was looking for Mom's photo albums. You wrote about her. About Christina. About how she left and you never knew why." Christopher sat down heavily at the kitchen table. His journals. Private pages he'd filled during those dark months after Christina disappeared. Therapy in ink when he couldn't afford the real kind. He'd forgotten they existed. "Hugh," he started, but his son interrupted. "I looked her up, Dad. Online. It wasn't hard. She's been teaching at Maplewood for 5 years. I saw her picture on the school website. She looked sad. Different from the girl in your old photos, but sad in the same way you get sad when you think I'm not looking." Hugh paused, his young face serious beyond his years. "I thought maybe you both deserved to not be sad anymore. So, I told you my other school wasn't challenging enough. I said I wanted to try Maplewood because they have a better science program. And you believed me because you always feel guilty about working so much. Christopher should have been angry. He should have grounded his son for the manipulation, the deception. Instead, he found himself fighting tears. You can't fix this, Hugh, he said softly. Some things are broken too long to repair. Hugh just looked at him with those eyes that saw too much. You haven't even tried to find out why she left. Don't you think you deserve to know? And the hell of it was, Hugh was right. Christopher did deserve to know. After 15 years of wondering, of that question mark that had haunted every major decision in his life, he deserved the truth. But wanting the truth and having the courage to pursue it were two different things. For a week, Christopher did nothing. He dropped Hugh off at school and picked him up, but he didn't go inside. He told himself it was better this way. Less complicated. Christina had made it clear that morning that she didn't want to revisit their past. The professional distance she'd maintained, the way she'd called him Mr. Martinez like they were strangers, that was a message. A clear one. Except Hugh wasn't giving up. Every day, he came home with little reports about Miss Mitchell. How she'd complimented his essay. How she'd laughed at his joke about photosynthesis. How she'd seemed distracted lately, looking out the window during quiet reading time. The kid was relentless. Then, on Friday afternoon, Hugh came running out of school with a pink unicorn pencil case. Not his. He was waving it like a flag. Dad. Miss Mitchell said someone left this in the classroom and nobody claimed it, so she asked if you could check the lost and found on Monday when you have time. She specifically asked for you. The lie was so transparent that Christopher almost laughed. There was no way a third-grade teacher needed a parent to check the lost and found. This was Hugh's work, obviously. But as he turned the pencil case over in his hands, he realized something. Christina could have said no. She could have told Hugh to have his father call the office. But she hadn't. She'd played along with whatever scheme Hugh had concocted. Which meant maybe, just maybe, she wanted to see him too. That weekend was the longest of Christopher's life. He kept picking up his phone to text her, then putting it down. He had her number now, obtained through the school directory, with a permission he definitely didn't have. He typed and deleted a dozen messages. Finally, on Sunday night, he sent something simple. Christina, it's Chris. Can we talk? He hit send before he could overthink it, then immediately regretted it. What if she blocked his number? What if she told the school he was harassing her? But 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Monday, 4 p.m. Coffee shop on 3rd Street. Come alone. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might break through his ribs. The coffee shop was small, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Christina was already there when he arrived, sitting in the back corner, her hands wrapped around a mug like she needed its warmth. She'd left her hair down, and she was wearing jeans and a green sweater that matched her eyes. For a moment, Christopher just stood in the doorway, looking at her, trying to reconcile the woman she'd become with the girl he'd loved. Then she looked up, saw him, and the fear in her eyes was so raw that it knocked the breath out of him. He sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Christina said, very quietly, I'm sorry. Just that. 2 words that carried 15 years of weight. Christopher's hands clenched on the table. Why? The word came out harsh, almost angry. Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me? I waited for you, Christina. I would have waited forever if I'd known you were coming back. She flinched, tears already sliding down her cheeks. My father, she began, then had to stop, her voice breaking. He found out about our plan. About the bus tickets, the apartment we'd put a deposit on. I don't know how, but he knew everything. And he told me that if I left, if I chose you over him, he would destroy your future. He had connections, Chris. At the university you'd gotten the scholarship to. In the industry you wanted to work in. He swore he would make sure you never got a job, never got a degree, that your life would be ruined. And I believed him, because he was capable of it. You know he was. Christopher did know. Carl Blue had been a powerful man in their small town, the kind who made phone calls that ended careers. But hearing it now, Understanding that Christina had sacrificed their future to protect his, it was almost too much. "You should have told me," he said, his voice cracking. "We could have figured something out together. We could have fought him." Christina shook her head, her hair falling forward to hide her face. "You were so close to getting out, Chris. So close to becoming everything you dreamed of. I couldn't let him take that from you. So I made a deal with him. I would leave, disappear completely, never contact you, and in return, he would leave you alone. Let you have your scholarship, your future. He moved us to Seattle a week later. Changed my phone number. Monitored my email. For years, he watched me like a prison guard, making sure I kept my promise." She looked up at him then, her eyes red and swollen. "He died 4 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. And suddenly I was free, but it was too late. You were married. You had a life. I saw the announcements, the photos online. You looked happy. I had no right to come back into your life and destroy that happiness. So I moved back here to this town because I guess some part of me wanted to be close to where we'd been, even if I couldn't be close to you. I became a teacher because being around kids made the loneliness a little more bearable. And I told myself I was fine, that I'd made my peace with my choices." Christopher reached across the table, took her hand. She started crying harder, but she didn't pull away. "Sandra passed away 3 years ago," he said gently. "Cancer. It was fast. She was sick for 6 months, and then she was gone. And I was fine with it, Christina. Not fine that she died, but fine with how we loved each other. Because she knew. I told her about you, about us, and she understood that part of me would always belong to you. She didn't ask me to forget. She just asked me to love her for who she was, not who I wished she could be. And I did. I loved her with everything I had left to give." Christina's fingers tightened around his. "She sounds like she was a good person." "She was," Christopher said. "The best. And she would have liked you. She told me once near the end that she hoped I'd find you again someday. That she hoped I'd get the answers I needed. I think she knew I couldn't fully heal without them." They sat like that for a while, just holding hands across the table, letting 15 years of grief and guilt and longing settle between them like dust. Finally, Christina said, "Your son is a little criminal mastermind, you know. When he told me about the pencil case scheme, I wanted to refuse, but I couldn't. I wanted to see you too much." Christopher laughed, a real laugh that felt rusty in his chest. "He's been running operations like a tiny CEO. I found a notebook in his room the other day. He's got a 12-phase plan to get us together. We're apparently on phase 3. "What's phase 12? Christina asked, and there was something almost hopeful in her voice. "I think it involves us getting married," Christopher admitted. "He's got a whole timeline mapped out. Very efficient." Christina smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it was like the sun coming out. "He might be getting ahead of himself." "Might be," Christopher agreed. "But he's not wrong about one thing. I never stopped loving you, Christina. Not when you left. Not when I married Sandra. Not when I tried to convince myself I was over it. You've been there in every decision I made, every moment that mattered. And seeing you again, it's like someone turned the lights back on in a house I thought would be dark forever." Christina was crying again, but these were different tears. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to go back or move forward or any of it. I'm scared, Chris. I'm so scared of messing this up, of hurting you again, of not being enough." Christopher stood up, moved around the table, and pulled her to her feet. He wrapped his arms around her, and she buried her face in his chest, her body shaking with sobs. "You don't have to know how," he murmured into her hair. "We'll figure it out together. That's what we should have done 15 years ago. That's what we're going to do now." But knowing they wanted to try, and actually navigating the complexity of it were two different challenges. Christina was still Hugh's teacher. There were professional boundaries, school policies, the whispers that would inevitably start if people found out the wealthy widower was dating his son's third-grade teacher. Christopher didn't care about the whispers. He'd built his fortune by not caring what people thought. But Christina cared. She'd spent her whole adult life being careful, being appropriate, following the rules that her father's control had burned into her. So they decided to take it slow. No public dates. No obvious displays. Just quiet moments stolen between drop-offs and pickups. Text messages late at night when Hugh was asleep. Phone calls where they talked about everything and nothing, rebuilding the connection they'd lost. Hugh, of course, was impatient. Phase 3 is supposed to lead to Phase 4 within 2 weeks. He informed his father one morning over breakfast. "You're behind schedule." Christopher raised an eyebrow. Phase 4 being? An official date in public where you act like adults who like each other instead of scared teenagers, Hugh said matter-of-factly. "Maybe dinner. Maybe a movie. Something normal people do." "We're taking our time," Christopher said. "Miss Mitchell has to think about her professional reputation. We have to think about what's best for you. This isn't just about us." Hugh put down his spoon, looked at his father with an intensity that was unsettling in a 9-year-old. "Dad, what's best for me is seeing you happy. Really happy. Not the fake happy you do when you think I'm watching, but the real kind. The kind you are when you're texting her and you don't know I can see you smiling at your phone. I'm not a baby. I know Mom died. I miss her every day. But I also know she wouldn't want you to be alone forever. And I think she'd really like Miss Mitchell. Mom always said life was too short to waste on being scared." The kid was right, and Christopher knew it. Sandra would have liked Christina. More than that, Sandra would have wanted him to take this chance. She'd told him as much in those final weeks, when she was too weak to do more than whisper, but still fighting to make sure he knew he was allowed to live after she was gone. So Christopher started pushing, gently but firmly. He suggested to Christina that maybe they could have dinner somewhere outside of town, somewhere nobody would recognize them. She agreed, nervous but willing. They drove 40 minutes to a little Italian place by the coast, and for 3 hours, they talked like they were 18 again. Except better, because now they had 15 years of life experience, of mistakes and losses and hard-won wisdom. They talked about Sandra and how Christina wished she could thank her. They talked about Carl Blue and the damage he'd done, and how Christina was still learning to live without his voice in her head telling her she wasn't good enough. They talked about Hugh and how being a parent was the most terrifying, wonderful thing in the world. As they were leaving, walking to the car under a sky full of stars, Christopher took her hand. Christina didn't pull away. She laced her fingers through his and smiled up at him, and for the first time in 15 years, Christopher felt like the broken pieces of himself were finally starting to fit back together. "I want to do this right," he told her. "I want to date you properly. Take you to dinner, go to movies, all the normal things we never got to do. And when enough time has passed, when Hugh is out of your class and it's not complicated anymore, I want to tell everyone. I want the whole world to know that Christina Mitchell is the love of my life, and I'm never letting her go again." Christina kissed him then, standing in the parking lot with the ocean wind whipping her hair around them. It was gentle and sweet and tasted like all the years they'd lost and all the years they might still have. When they pulled apart, she was crying again, but this time she was laughing too. "Your son is going to be insufferable when he finds out he was right." "He already is," Christopher said. "Wait till you see Phase 8. I think it involves grandchildren." But even as they were carefully rebuilding what they'd lost, trouble was coming. Because in a small town, secrets don't stay secret for long, and there were people who thought they knew what was best for everyone else. Joanne Zager, the school principal, called Christina into her office 3 weeks after that first coffee shop meeting. "I've heard some concerning rumors," Joanne said, her face stern, "about you and Mr. Martinez. I want to assure you that I take these matters very seriously. If there's an inappropriate relationship between a teacher and a parent, especially the parent of one of your current students, that's grounds for disciplinary action." Christina felt her stomach drop. "There's nothing inappropriate happening," she said carefully. "Mr. Martinez and I knew each other years ago. We've reconnected as old friends. That's all." Joanne's expression said she didn't believe that for a second. "Miss Mitchell, I've been a principal for 20 years. I know when something is going on. And while I understand that human connections can be complicated, you need to understand that your position here requires the highest ethical standards. If you can't maintain appropriate professional boundaries, we'll need to discuss your future at this school." Christina left the meeting shaking. That night, she called Christopher, told him what happened. She was ready to end things, to pull back, to protect her job and her reputation. But Christopher was having none of it. "I'm not losing you again because someone else decided what's appropriate," he said firmly. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're two adults who care about each other. If they have a problem with that, they can take it up with me." "It's not that simple," Christina protested. "This is my career. Teaching is all I have." "It's not all you have," Christopher said gently. "You have me. You have Hugh. You have a whole life waiting if you're brave enough to reach for it. I'm not saying quit your job. I'm saying don't let fear make your decisions for you. We've already lost 15 years to fear. I won't lose any more." But the pressure kept building. Parents started talking. Some pulled their kids aside, asking questions about Miss Mitchell and Hugh's dad. Teachers whispered in the break room. Christina felt like she was under a microscope, every interaction scrutinized, every smile analyzed. She started having panic attacks before school, sitting in her car trying to breathe, wondering if she should just resign and save everyone the trouble. Hugh noticed. Kids always notice more than adults think. He came home one day and told his father that Miss Mitchell seemed sad, that she'd been crying in the supply closet during recess when she thought nobody could see. That was when Hugh decided to implement Phase 7 ahead of schedule. Phase 7, according to his carefully documented plan, was called the Grand Gesture. He'd written in his notebook, "Sometimes adults need help being brave. Sometimes you have to make the choice so obvious they can't say no." Christopher found out about Phase 7 the hard way, standing in the school gymnasium on a Thursday evening for the annual spring science fair. Hugh had told him his project was about plant growth. Christopher had signed the permission forms, helped him print the poster board, assumed it was a straightforward experiment about sunlight and water. It was not about plant growth. Hugh's display was set up in the center of the gym, a trifold board with the title, "The Science of Human Happiness, a Longitudinal Study." Christopher felt dread pooling in his stomach as he approached. On the board were graphs, charts, and photos. Photos of Christopher looking miserable at various business functions. Photos of Christina sitting alone in her classroom. And then more recent photos, candid shots Hugh must have taken without them knowing, of Christopher smiling at his phone, of Christina laughing in her car, of the two of them together at the Italian restaurant, caught through the window. The hypothesis section read, "People who have been sad for a long time can become happy again if they're given permission to try. My data shows that my dad and Miss Mitchell were both unhappy for measurable periods. After reconnection, their happiness levels increased significantly. Conclusion: love is a renewable resource, and fear is the only thing stopping it from growing." Christopher wanted to die, or possibly kill his son, or both. The gym was packed with parents and teachers and students. Everyone was reading Hugh's board. Everyone was looking at the photos. And standing near the refreshment table, pale and frozen, was Christina. Hugh stood next to his display, looking pleased with himself. When he saw his father approaching, his face got serious. "Dad, I know you're mad, but you guys weren't being brave enough. Somebody had to do something." "Hugh, you can't just—" Christopher started, but he was interrupted by Joan Zager's voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Martinez, I think we need to have a conversation. Now." The principal's face was thunderous. Christina looked like she was going to be sick, and Christopher realized that his 9-year-old son had just blown up their carefully maintained secret in the most public way possible. They followed Joanne to her office, Christina's hand trembling in Christopher's as they walked. The principal closed the door behind them with a decisive click. "I think," Joanne said coldly, "that you both owe me an explanation." Christina opened her mouth, but Christopher spoke first. "We're in love," he said simply. "We've known each other since we were teenagers. We lost each other. We found each other again. And yes, the timing is complicated because she's Hugh's teacher, but we're not doing anything unethical. We're not sneaking around on school property. We're not letting it affect her professional judgment. We're just two people trying to figure out if we get a second chance at something we thought we'd lost forever." Joanne's expression didn't soften. The appearance of impropriety is sometimes just as damaging as actual impropriety, Mr. Martinez. Miss Mitchell's position here requires trust. How can parents trust her judgment with their children if they think she's romantically involved with one of them? Because my judgment hasn't changed, Christina said, finding her voice. I teach every student the same way I always have. Hugh gets no special treatment. If anything, I'm harder on him because I'm so careful not to show favoritism. But I'm also a human being, Joanne. I'm allowed to have a personal life. I'm allowed to fall in love. And I'm tired of pretending I'm not, just because some people might gossip about it. There was a long silence. Then Joanne sighed, and some of the hardness left her face. I'm not heartless, she said. I understand that feelings are complicated. But this puts me in a difficult position. The school board will have questions. Parents will have concerns. I need to know that you're both taking this seriously, that you understand the implications. We do, Christopher said. And if it helps, I'm planning to transfer Hugh to a different class for next year. Remove the direct connection. Would that address your concerns? Joanne considered this. It might. But Miss Mitchell, you need to understand that your relationship will be under scrutiny. If there's any indication that it's affecting your professional performance, we'll need to revisit this conversation. Christina nodded, relief flooding her face. I understand. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you for being willing to listen. They left the office hand in hand, and Christopher realized something important. He didn't care who knew anymore. He didn't care about the whispers or the gossip or the disapproving looks. He'd spent too much of his life caring what people thought, trying to prove he was good enough, smart enough, successful enough. It was exhausting. And it was over. Hugh was still at his display when they got back to the gym, now surrounded by a crowd of curious students and parents. Kevin Calloway, another parent Christopher knew vaguely, was reading the board with interest. Your kid's got guts, Kevin said when Christopher approached. My daughter could use some of that confidence. Hugh looked up at his father, trying to gauge how much trouble he was in. Christopher just shook his head, fighting a smile. You're grounded, he said. For a month. Maybe 2. We're going to have a long talk about boundaries and appropriate behavior and not manipulating people's lives like you're running a psychological experiment. Hugh's face fell. But Dad, Christopher continued, his voice softening, you are all so right. Sometimes people do need help being brave. Sometimes kids see things more clearly than adults because they haven't learned to be afraid of all the wrong things yet. So you're grounded, but I'm also proud of you. Even though I'll never, ever tell you that again because I don't want to encourage this kind of behavior. Hugh grinned, and Christopher knew that the lesson about boundaries wasn't going to stick. His son was going to be a force of nature, probably run a company or a country someday, and there was nothing Christopher could do to stop it. Christina appeared at his elbow, still looking shell-shocked but also slightly amused. Your son just publicly declared that we're in love in front of the entire school community, she said. I'm not sure whether to hug him or hide in my car for the rest of my life. Hug him, Christopher suggested. The car option doesn't really solve anything. Trust me, I tried that approach for 15 years. She did hug Hugh, pulling him close and whispering something in his ear that made the boy's face light up. Then she straightened, took a deep breath, and turned to face the crowd of people still milling around, some watching them openly, others pretending not to. Christopher took her hand, lacing their fingers together where everyone could see. And you know what happened? Nothing dramatic. The world didn't end. People didn't gasp in horror. A few parents smiled. A few looked uncomfortable. Most just went back to looking at science projects because, ultimately, people are far more interested in their own lives than in anyone else's. That was the moment Christopher understood something crucial. The fear that had controlled so much of his life, so much of Christina's life, was mostly imaginary. Yes, there would be gossip. Yes, there would be people who disapproved. But there would also be people who understood, who rooted for them, who saw two people trying to build something good out of the wreckage of lost time. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. Christina and Christopher stopped hiding. They went to dinner in town, walked on the beach where people could see them, picked Hugh up from school together. There were stares, sure. There were whispered comments. Mildred Parham, a busybody from the PDA, made some pointed remarks about appropriate behavior. But there was also support. Sandra Kahn, a teacher who'd worked with Christina for years, told her she was happy for her. Diego Lean, another parent, told Christopher his kid talked about Miss Mitchell like she was a superhero and that anyone who made her happy was okay in his book. Hugh thrived on the chaos he created. He was insufferable about being right, creating new phases in his plan that now included weekend activities and family dinners. Christopher found himself actually enjoying the scheming, the way his son's mind worked, always 3 steps ahead, always looking for angles. One evening, about 6 weeks after the science fair incident, Hugh presented his father with a new document. Phase 11 had been updated. "What's this?" Christopher asked, reading the neatly typed page. "An implementation timeline," Hugh said seriously. "For the proposal. Phase 12. You need to ask Miss Mitchell to marry you, and I've calculated the optimal timing based on relationship progression data, social acceptability factors, and the fact that I really want to call her something other than Miss Mitchell at some point." Christopher laughed until his sides hurt. "You've calculated the optimal proposal timing? Dad, you're 33. She's 32. You've already wasted 15 years. The data suggests you shouldn't waste any more." Hugh handed over another sheet of paper. "I've also compiled a list of potential ring styles based on her aesthetic preferences, which I determined through careful observation of her jewelry choices and several proposal location options ranked by romantic value versus logistical feasibility." "You terrify me sometimes," Christopher said, but he was smiling. "Is that a yes?" Hugh pressed. "Because I can start phase 12 prep immediately. I have some thoughts about how we should arrange the moment to maximize emotional impact." Christopher looked at his son, this brilliant, manipulative, loving little person who'd taken it upon himself to fix his father's broken heart. "How about I do it my way," he suggested, "without charts or data or optimal timing calculations?" Hugh looked deeply skeptical. "Your way has a lower probability of success." "Maybe," Christopher agreed. "But some things shouldn't be calculated. Some things should just be felt." He did propose to Christina 3 months later, but not in any of the locations Hugh had suggested. He did it in room 7, after school on a Friday when the building was empty and the afternoon light was coming through the windows just right. Christina was erasing the whiteboard, her back to him, humming something under her breath. He said, "Christina." She turned, saw him standing there in the doorway of the classroom where their second chance had started, and her face went soft. "Chris, what are you doing here?" "I've been thinking," he said, walking into the room, "about all the years we lost. About how your father took our future and burned it because he thought he knew better. About how we let fear and other people's expectations control our lives for too long." He pulled the ring box from his pocket, watched her eyes go wide. "I don't want to waste any more time. I don't want to wait for optimal timing or perfect circumstances, or for everyone else to approve. I just want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to fight with you about stupid things like what to have for dinner. I want to watch Hugh drive us both crazy with his master plans. I want everything, Christina. I want the life we were supposed to have 15 years ago, and I want it now." Christina was crying, of course. She cried at everything these days, happy tears that replaced the sad ones she'd shed for so many years. "You're really asking me this in my classroom?" "It seemed appropriate," Christopher said. "This is where I found you again, where everything started making sense." He opened the box. The ring was simple, elegant, the kind of thing he hoped she'd love. "So what do you say? Will you marry me?" She kissed him instead of answering, which Christopher took as a yes. When they finally pulled apart, she was laughing and crying simultaneously. "Hugh is going to be completely unbearable about this," she managed. "He's going to claim full credit." "He can have it," Christopher said. "Without him, we'd probably still be circling each other, too scared to take the leap." They told Hugh that night over dinner. Christopher had planned this part carefully, wanting to make sure his son understood how important he was to this whole story. Hugh was eating spaghetti, getting sauce on his shirt like always, when Christopher said, "So, Miss Mitchell, and I have some news." Hugh looked up, immediately alert. Phase 12. Phase 12, Christopher confirmed. I asked her to marry me this afternoon. She said yes. We wanted you to be the first to know because none of this would have happened without you. You gave us the courage to try. You saw something we couldn't see, and you refused to give up on it. For once, Hugh was speechless. He just stared at them, his fork halfway to his mouth, sauce dripping onto his plate. Then he said, very quietly, "Does this mean I can call her Mom?" Christina reached across the table, took his hand. Only if you want to. I'm not trying to replace your mom, Hugh. I could never do that. But I would be honored to be another person who loves you, who's there for you, who helps take care of you. Hugh thought about this for a moment. Then he said, Can I call you Christina at home and Miss Mitchell at school until the end of the year? That seems less confusing. That seems perfect, Christina agreed. And Hugh smiled, that satisfied smile he got when his plans worked out exactly as he'd calculated, and went back to his spaghetti like he hadn't just orchestrated the entire future of his family. The wedding happened 6 months later, small and private, because that's what both of them wanted. Just close friends, Hugh in a tiny suit looking far too pleased with himself, and vows that made everyone cry. Christopher promised to never let fear make his decisions again. Christina promised to believe she deserved to be happy. Hugh, who'd insisted on being part of the ceremony, promised to stop scheming quite so much, a promise everyone knew he wouldn't keep but appreciated anyway. When the officiant pronounced them married, Hugh cheered louder than anyone else, and Christopher thought about Sandra, about how she'd wanted exactly this for him. He could almost feel her approval, her joy that he'd finally let himself live again. They built their life together, the three of them. Christina moved into Christopher's house, and slowly the cold, minimalist space became warm with her touches, photographs and books and all the small details that make a house a home. Hugh adjusted to having another parent around, someone who actually cooked vegetables and insisted on reasonable bedtimes, with surprising grace. There were hard moments, sure. Times when Hugh missed his mom so badly it hurt. Times when Christina felt like she was intruding on memories she wasn't part of. Times when Christopher's work pulled him away too much and everyone felt the strain. But they figured it out together, the way families do, with patience and communication and the understanding that love doesn't fix everything but it makes the hard things bearable. A year after the wedding, Christopher found himself standing in his kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday morning, watching Christina make breakfast while Hugh did homework at the table. Nothing special was happening. There was no grand moment, no dramatic revelation. Just sunlight through the windows, coffee brewing, the sound of his wife's laugh when Hugh made a terrible joke. And Christopher realized something profound. This was it. This was what he'd been missing all those years, what he'd been searching for without even knowing it. Not the dramatic reunion or the proposal or the wedding. Just this. Ordinary moments made extraordinary by being shared with the people he loved. The life that had seemed impossible was now his reality, all because a 9-year-old boy had decided his father deserved to be happy and had refused to take no for an answer. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone else be brave for you. Sometimes the greatest gift is permission to try again, to reach for happiness even when you think you don't deserve it. Christopher and Christina had lost 15 years to fear and other people's control. But they got their second chance, delivered by a child who understood something essential that adults often forget. Love doesn't run out. It doesn't diminish when you give it to someone new. It just grows, filling all the empty spaces, healing all the old wounds, until one day you wake up and realize the life you're living is the one you were always meant to have. So, here's the question for you, wherever you're watching this from. If you had the chance to fix something broken in your past, would you take it? Would you be brave enough to reach for a love you thought was lost forever? Or would fear hold you back, the same fear that keeps so many of us trapped in lives that feel too small, too safe, too lonely? Because here's what Christopher and Christina learned. The risk of trying and failing is nothing compared to the certainty of regret that comes from never trying at all. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe gives you a 9-year-old mastermind who refuses to let you give up on yourself. Let us know in the comments what you would do. Have you ever had a second chance at something you thought was lost? Have you ever been brave enough to take it? And if you haven't yet, what's stopping you? We'd love to hear your stories. And if this one touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our upcoming videos. Because there are more stories out there, more proof that it's never too late to choose happiness, to choose love, to choose the life you deserve. Thank you for watching. Now go be brave.